I have to say, I love having kids in the room. The energy level they make my job easy. So, on that note, my job tonight, I am not an environmental expert. My job is just to help get through the night, see through the evening, make sure your questions get answered. Hopefully you'll meet some new people, have a little bit of fun. But if you have any questions, please let me know. We're not going to have any formal breaks, but the bathrooms are through there. If you need to use them, please go ahead. And on that note, we have a great evening planned with some fantastic speakers, and I'm going to let Mr. John Walsh, Vice President, come and kick it off. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Amy. And I'll second what she said. It's great to see a lot of new faces here tonight. In past forums, we learned about how important water conservation is, especially at this time of year. So our collective group of environmental partners decided tonight we wanted to talk about how we all can make a difference in terms of water conservation. So we brought together a panel of experts to talk to tonight about best practices in water conservation. You'll learn about how to identify so we can measure our success in water conservation. We're going to learn about landscaping techniques that will help folks reduce their water usage substantially. And we'll also hear from a renowned water conservation activist about how we need help the town of Sharon reduce their water usage by millions of gallons. We all have a role in water conservation, whether we're individuals, local governments, or corporations. And I hope tonight we can answer your questions so that we can all make every drop of water count. Before we get started, I'd like to thank a couple folks from the group of environmental partners. First of all, Dave Burbank. I'm not sure if Dave can see you. Oh, Dave, you are. She's from the Weir Restoration Park. Kathy Reardon.
Happy to make it.
Kathy's from the Hingham Land Conservation Trust. Charles Wilsey from the Hingham Land Conservation Trust. Patty Coyle from the Weir Restoration Park Committee. Dick Avery from Grace Park. Samantha Woods from Weir River Watersheds. Judith Von from the Homeland. Scott McIsaac from the Hingham Conservation Commission. Scott, here? No? And then finally, Bernie Colston from Crown. And with that, I will turn it back to Amy.
Thank you, John. So, I'm sure some of you have noticed we have some local celebrities in the house. I'm going to ask Ms. Samantha Woods to come up and introduce the project and talk a little about it before we meet. And Brittany, if you'd like to join Sam. Okay.
One of the planning calls that we had for planning this forum, actually, Greg came up to on the phone and he said, "Hey, I've got this group of hockey players in town that need to do community service." And I said, "Great, why don't you have them do a PSA?" Little did I know he was actually going to follow through with that. I kind of set it
water
off.
for hockey. That was going to be the theme, right?
Something
Save
like
water
that.
for ice. I don't know.
Yeah, save the water for the ice skating funds. So, anyways, that was sort of the genesis of this discussion. And I was so pleased when he reached out to these young people and their families and the leaders of their teams, coaches. Thank you so much. And he pulled it all together. And I think, are we going to see?
Is it first or introduce them? Instead of a red carpet,
Let's introduce these wonderful young people who gave their time to do a PSA that I
Yeah, and I was lucky to spend the entire winter with all of these red jacketed groups over here. I think that was Hingham Talkie as well as doing most things around here. But with Hingham Talkie, we did have some community service hours that these kids had to go give. And when we talked about it and Sam came up with the idea, they jumped at it. And we decided, you know, as being little hockey players and I like to be very competitive, that we make this into a little competitive thing as well. So we split them up into 3 teams, and you're about to see 3 different videos that they put together. Each team is going to be competing for a piece of dinner that Ronit's going to be getting now. Surprise, thank you. So these are all on Facebook, on a site that we'll give you later, and at the end of March, July.
Should each have the invitation.
Right. The information on
They're
it.
very competitive.
So whichever one of you guys is able to drive up the most amount of votes for their video by July 15th will get one of Ronnie's pizza dinners. So with that, I guess we're going to bring them up at each of the groups. Let's do the first group first.
Want to do the first one first?
Yeah, we'll do that.
This is,
The mustache or
this is the,
the older group?
Michael?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Mike Selesky, who could not be here tonight, he's captain of the high school team next year, and he's on the green committee at the high school as well. He kind of anchored this first video with some help from some of the older kids in the group, which I'll bring up. It's, who do we have here? Nick Lynch?
Come on up, Nick.
Nick, you have to Reed Club. Cam Tedeschi. And Alex Patel. Have you guys haven't seen this yet, have you?
The lights on the TV. The lights?
They can't see.
Yeah.
We're watershed.
Good, ready?
The Weir River watershed has been classified as stress water basin in the state of Massachusetts. One reason is because residential and business water demand often doubles over the summer.
Here are the top 5 things you can do to protect and preserve the water resources in your watershed.
Number 5.
Challenge your siblings to see who can take the shortest shower.
Number 4.
Brush your teeth in the shower.
Number 3.
Be a leak detective. Check your bathroom fixtures every 6 months for leaks.
Now number 2.
Use a rain barrel to water your garden.
And finally, number 1.
If you have to wash your car, wait for it to rain.
Following announcement is brought to you in part by Weir Water Company, Stewards of the Environment, Hull Land and Conservation Trust, the Weir River Estuary.
So they'll be coming around asking for your vote shortly. The next group, Greg, is this next one?
The next group are water down the drain.
Water down the drain. So we got Connor and Maddie Cummings, I think, in this group. We got Will Moore. And is that it? Yeah. All right, you guys are, so this is water around the drain. This is the next group.
Wow, look at that. That's a skating pond just going down the drain. That stinks.
It sure does. What a waste.
Do you know how much water it takes to water just 1 inch over 1 acre? I know, 27,000 gallons. Thanks, that's more than my swimming pool. Yeah, at an inch a week, it could be 10 swimming pools by the end of the summer. Bummer! Let's rethink lawn watering!
Following announcement is brought to you in part by Weir Water Company, Stewards of the Environment, Hull Land and Conservation Trust.
All right, and the last group I think thought they were going to a Halloween party, but nonetheless they came up and did their thing, and they're 100% attendance too tonight, so they'll really be working the room later. But
We're missing Drew.
oh, we're missing one. That's right, Drew's on vacation. So we've got Brendan and Connor Richardson. Connor Trainer. Maddie and Connie Gilman. You guys heard it?
Three, two, one.
Boy, have you brushed your teeth yet? At school, I learned that turning off the faucet while brushing your teeth can save water. Brushing your teeth seems like a quick job. I know it, but before you know it, 4 gallons of water may have slipped down the drain. Yikes, that's 2,880 gallons of water. And it just runs off and goes down the drain. Bummer. Convincing our sister to cut down on her shower time may not be an option. But turning off the faucet is easy.
Following announcement is brought to you in part by Weir Water Company, Stewards of the Environment, All Land and Conservation Trust.
Brendan told me there's a comedian in the house that might have an original joke for the group on water conservation. Where's Jackson? Oh, you're gonna think about it? You want some more time to think about it? Do it.
Water conservation.
Oh, well, do you have another joke you want to share?
Jackson, there's water. Don't do it, Jackson.
Okay, why don't you
Jackson, do it.
Jackson, why don't you think about it and raise your hand? Jackson, give over your speeches. All right, thank you guys. Jackson.
Got
There's one.
exit stage left.
All right. Where will the PSA
The PSAs will be running all summer on Kingdom's Own Community Access Media, and we want to thank them as well. They were a tremendous part of helping us actually film this and edit it and produce it. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you. And just a few housekeeping things. A couple people came up to me to mention that it's pretty cold in the room, so we've asked that they turn the air conditioning down. And I should have started, for all the individuals that have been here with us before, we usually sit up by the windows. And last time when we were up there, the acoustics were a bit better, but because of the sunlight, we couldn't see the screen, and that's why we had to move down here this evening. So if you can't hear, we have some microphones. Put up your hand and let us know. I know there's a bit of an echo, but we'll try to work through it. Okay? So the next portion of our evening is going to be the presentations, and we're very lucky to have 3 environmental experts here. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, but we're going to start with Paul Lowenstein. Thank you. Come on up, Paul. And I'm going to just switch computers to get the PowerPoint.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight talking about a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I've been working on water conservation now in Sharon for about a little over 10 years. As a member of the Sharon Water Management Advisory Committee, it's an all-volunteer committee. It meets about once a month, and we kind of serve as like a board of directors for the water department. The superintendent of the DPW, who is also in charge of the water department, attends every meeting. We talk about a range of subjects, many of which are related to water conservation, but some of which also get into management of the water system as well. So it's been a productive relationship, I think. As soon as you have the first slide, kind of start. In addition to being on the water committee, I started out basically after I sold my business in 2002 to get involved in the local water system, and I thought it would be interesting to see if one person who really cared about the environment can make a difference in, by just getting involved could lead towards an improvement in the water use efficiency in our town. And in the process, I kind of got pulled out of Sharon into the Neponset River Watershed Association, 14 towns in the Watershed Association, and one part of it. So, is that better? Does that help? And so I thought, well, maybe I can get involved in a wider scenario of the watershed itself. And then from there, they sent me off to become a member of the Water Supply Citizens Advisory Committee, the MWRA. So that's a major urban water supply that serves 2.5 million people. Quite a different ballgame altogether. But all of it's been a learning process. Sometimes I think of it as a free college education in water. But anyway, so that's who I am. I'd like to have the next slide, please. If you could advance the slide, please. Thank you. Suburban sprawl and associated lawn irrigation have profoundly impacted flows of rivers and streams in densely populated eastern Massachusetts. The Ipswich River is the poster child. The left-hand photo was taken in 1968 by my father, I might add. The right-hand photo was taken 31 years later in 1999. Quite a difference. Note the desiccated fish carcasses in the photo on the right. Next slide, please. In my own hometown of Sharon, while pumping in summer, when lawn irrigation is in full swing, occasionally causes billings or stop flowing completely, as you can see in the picture on the right. Next slide, please. Sharon's water conservation program has reduced the town's water use by about 100 million gallons per year, or about 20%, despite an increase in population, about 6% more people over this time span from 1995 to 2013. In 2013, Sharon averaged 55 gallons per person per day. However, despite that might sound pretty good compared to the state water conservation standard of 65 gallons per person per day, but the most efficient 500 homes in Sharon average less than 30 gallons per person per day. If every household in Sharon used 30 gallons per person per day, Sharon's water use could be almost cut in half. Next slide, please. Peak demand drives the cost of supplying the community with water because the capacity of the water supply system must be sufficient to accommodate peak demand with enough to spare for fighting fires at all times. Peak demand in Sharon has dropped by a third since 1995. Next slide, please. In 2001, lawn irrigation would actually empty the 500,000 gallon Hampton Road water tank, temporarily compromising the ability to fight fires. You can, as everybody can see that, it goes down to zero where it says empty there. Next slide, please. By 2010, thanks to water conservation measures were preventing the tank from emptying. Next slide, please. Sharon's water conservation program costs about $60,000 per year. However, it is saving about $70,000 per year worth of electricity to pump the wells and water treatment chemicals. The big savings, however, is avoidance of the multi-million-dollar cost of importing supplementary water from MWRA, which is an option to meet demand. Other benefits include better drinking water quality, healthier local ecosystems, and lower greenhouse gas emissions. Whoops, what happened? We're keeping about 100 tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere. Water supply, on average in the United States, comprises about 12% of our energy use for pumping and heating water, etc. So, makes a difference. Next slide, please. The main drivers of water conservation are full cost, conservation-oriented water rates, lawn irrigation restrictions, rebates for efficient toilets and washing machines, and public outreach and education. The Volunteer Water Management Advisory Committee meets monthly to review the situation and make recommendations to the water commissioners as needed. Next slide, please. Steeply ascending water rates provide customers with a strong financial incentive to conserve water. Fixed fees do nothing to encourage conservation, so they should be kept to a minimum, relying instead on water usage rates to generate sufficient water revenues to cover the cost of providing the community with water. Also, rates should be higher in summer than in winter to emphasize the need to conserve water when it matters the most. Next slide, please. Sorry about that. Lawn irrigation restrictions help keep down non-essential outdoor water use in summer. In Sharon, homeowners can only irrigate for 2 hours twice a week. Next slide, please. This is a picture of my lawn, by the way. There is enough rainfall in Massachusetts to cultivate an attractive rain-only lawn. Next slide, please. Water bill inserts provide information about a variety of water topics at the point in time when customers are paying their bills. There's no extra cost for postage because they slide right in with a water bill. You've already paid for the stamp on the water bill. You can have an insert for no extra charge. Next slide, please. Whoops, did we miss one? Next, after that. In 2010, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection awarded a grant to try to replicate Sharon's success with water conservation in Georgetown, which is located in the headwaters of the highly stressed Parker River up on the North Shore. The program included a citizen water conservation committee, conservation-oriented water rates, a rebate program, and water bill inserts. In addition, the third graders at the Pembroke Elementary School received a 4-session course in water conservation. Next slide, please. Teaching school children about water conservation is a good way to reach their parents. Next slide, please. The third graders at the Pembroke School got a homework assignment to look up their parents' water bills and calculate gallons per person per day. The results showed a huge disparity between households that use modest amounts of water and those that use a lot more. And I'd like to just, if I may, impose on you to ask for a show of hands, how many people in this room know how much water you use in your household? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7 or 8 out of maybe what, 35 or so, maybe 20%. That's the highest I've ever seen. Usually it's more like 10 or 15%. But it makes this point anyway. Most people don't know what their household use is. I mean, if you want to lose weight and get a scale, you look at it every day, right? Same thing with water conservation. If you want to conserve water, you look at your water bill every quarter and figure out, how much water you use per person per day, and compare that with the town average and the state average and see how you're doing. Next slide, please. The third graders also installed $2 faucet aerators in their bathrooms at home and computed the annual water savings, assuming 5 minutes of faucet use per day. In 2012, they installed 16 aerators that are saving an estimated 28,000 gallons of water per year. These results were incorporated into a public service announcement that played on the local cable TV in Georgetown, much as the hockey players have done here in Hingham. At the end of the announcement, the third graders sang a cute song about water conservation, which I won't sing. Next slide, please. Applying similar methods to those that worked in Sharon seems to be working in Georgetown too, as you can see from this graph. Final slide, please. I hope you can see this slide. If you can't, raise your hand and I'll explain it. Yes. I'll try to point out, what's going on here. In the 1980s, water use in the MWRA service area was exceeding the 300 million gallons per day safe yield of the Quabbin and Wachusett reservoirs. So I'm going to walk over here and see if I can, if you can get that back for me. That would be nice. It's all right. You can see this is the 1980s here where it kind of peaked. And this is the safe yield of the reservoirs, 300 million gallons per day. They were kind of worried because in the 1980s, they were taking more water than the safe yield of the reservoir, and they were afraid that sooner or later they were going to empty the reservoir and there wouldn't be any water for Boston. So a proposal was made to spend $500 million for a pipeline to bring water east from the Connecticut River Valley. But that was met with stiff opposition from the residents of Western Massachusetts who didn't want to part with their water. So the MWRA began fixing leaks and promoting water conservation. Today, and I want to explain here that this fan-shaped thing is what the experts in this graph was made in 1986. Okay, I found it in some dusty old archives at the Neponset River Watershed Association many years ago, and I pounced on it, of course. They said, look, we can either just continue with business as usual, and as the population grows, we're going to need more and more water, or we can conserve water. And they had various levels of water conservation scenarios, projecting out 20 or 30 years, and they said up to 2020, that's about what? It started in 86, so that would have been 34 years more. They said the best they could do was down here, around 259 million gallons per day. The red line shows what actually happened. We're down now to under 200 million gallons per day in the greater Boston area, down from about 330 million gallons per day in the 1980s, thanks to fixing leaks and promoting conservation, more efficient plumbing fixtures, et cetera, et cetera. The outcome is better than the wildest imaginings of professional consultants in 1986. And the $500 million pipeline, needless to say, was never built. Unfortunately, it would have been a huge waste of money. So that concludes my presentation. I guess, are we taking questions later?
We are. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I should have explained before Paul started what we're doing. The three panelists this evening are each giving a short presentation to give a foundation so that we can generate our questions to ask the panelists and the moderator afterwards. So hold on to them. We'll be there momentarily. And Layla, you're up next, please. I'll give you the microphone.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, Layla.
Hello. I'm Layla Parker, and I work for the Massachusetts Department of Fish and Game in the Division of Ecological Restoration. And I run a program which is called the River In-Stream Flow Stewards, otherwise known as RIFFLES. So what this is a group of, what we do is we work with communities around the state who are concerned about stream flow alterations in their local watershed. And they come to us, first we reach out to them, and say, you know, can you help us out here? And so what we help them do is sort of two main things. The first is to understand current flow patterns in the stream, and the second is to, you know, if their concerns are founded, to look at approaches to restoring a more natural flow regime. And, you know, we talk around this word flow restoration, and it's a daunting prospect. We're not attempting to return rivers to where they were before humans lived here, but we're trying to seek a way to balance the impacts that we have on stream flow. And I should say that Paul touched on issues of stream flow stress. Stream flow is considered sort of a driving variable of aquatic health in a lot of different ways. And I could get into more if folks have questions about that. And I also say that our program is totally voluntary. It's a collaborative thing that we do with community aspects of work with them. So the next slide, like I said, there's two main things that we do. Understand flow patterns and try to set flow goals. And I'm going to talk about both of those with respect to the Weir. So to understand flow patterns, we generally gauge the stream. And what you see in this slide to the left are a number of different staff gauges that are essentially measuring water levels. The map on the right, I don't expect you to read it, but it just shows that there are a number of stream gauges that have been installed in the Weir over the years by the Weir Watershed Association, by the U.S. Geological Survey, Aquarium has done some measurements, and then the RIFFLES program in the last year has co-opted one of the Weir Watershed Association's gauge. The one at Union Street, just in the bottom right of those photos. And so the way that the gauging works is you're essentially reading the water level, and you're also making a series of field measurements of flow, and you make a relationship between the water levels and the flow, and you convert your measured water levels into stream flow. If you go to the next slide, you'll see two pictures of what that might look like if you're thinking about flow on a graph, and folks have probably seen graphs like these, but you're essentially measuring things, and you're measuring a volume of water that's passing by a point at a given time. So that's cubic feet per second is the unit that we measure in. So what you see here is stream flow in cubic feet per second, CFS, over time. And I'm showing you data from the RIFFLES gauge, which is on the bottom left. And you can see that there aren't a ton of data points there, because that is volunteers who use the gauges when they can make it work. Paul's group and Sharon does a lot of really excellent, almost daily stream flow measurements. And we hope to get virtual volunteers in the Weir up to that level. Paul, you're gonna have to go through into shape. But in USGS data set that you can see here is measured with a sensor that makes measurements every 15 minutes. So you have a more continuous data record. This is over 3.5 years. And what you can basically see in these two graphs is that we've measured very high flows. The USGS gauge we measured up to over 400 CFS down to flows of almost 0 that you can see in the summer of 2007 in that graph. So we have some sense of the range of flows. If you go to the next slide, you can see that we were at high flows, we've seen that we were at low flows. There are lots of anecdotal observations that people have made about high and low flows. And the question is, what are our goals for flow patterns? And there are a lot of different scientific tools that folks can use to set stream flow goals. And I'm going to talk about those, and I'm also going to talk about approaches to balance the scientific findings with human needs for water as well. For the next slide, the consultants from GCA did a study of the Weir River watershed in 2002 where they used local conditions, precipitation, observations of the geology of the watershed, as well as reference gauges, similar stream gauges nearby, to come up with stream flow goals for different seasons of the year, which you can see in this table at the top. And then what I also show here is a comparison of those goals with the USGS gauge data over those 3.5-year period. So you can see here that sometimes the USGS flows were above those goals and sometimes they were below, just sort of suggesting that the goals are in a reasonable area. So that is sort of one set of work that's already been done in the Weir to think about stream flow goals that could be built on. The approach that they used, the next slide is sort of similar to the approach that's used by the USGS in this tool that they have made available, which uses reference gauges around the state and then the characteristics of whatever stream you're in to try to compute unaffected stream flow. So this looks at, were there to be no development, no withdrawals, what would stream flow look like? And then you can run that through a statistical program and say, okay, what is the percentile, or what, so for instance, this graph shows 3 lines. The lower line, the 25th percentile flow is exceeded 75% of the time. So you can say, on an average June, over the last 50 years, we would expect that stream flow in the Weir would be at least 15 CFS. And that's this 25th percentile flow. And you can use one of these percentiles as your target flow. So you're not saying we will be at 100% of unaffected flow, you're taking some percentage as your goal. So if you go to the next slide, the North and South Rivers Watershed Association and the town of Situate and my group and a lot of other partners got together and did a flow goal setting process for First Drain Brook in Situate, where Ripples volunteers had over many years seen very low on the natural flows. They got everyone together, they talked about what would we expect to see in this watershed. They used a tool similar to what I just talked about to say, what do we think natural flows would be? They thought about what do we think we can't release from our reservoirs and still provide water supplies. And they came up with, in this lower left-hand corner, some flow targets for different seasons of the year and also for going over the fish otters from the 2 main reservoirs in town. And since October 2011, the town has been operating their reservoirs to release those flows, which is great, and it's gone really well. So those are my examples of flow setting. There's plenty of other approaches that we can talk about more, and we're happy to help and talk more.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Debbie Cook, and I work for the North and South River Watershed Program or Watershed Association, and I'm the manager of the Greenscapes Program. And I want to say my interest is, first of all, the Greenscapes Program is purely educational. I mean, we, as Paul said, the education and outreach is really important, and that's what we try to do. So the scientific side I leave for some
Samantha, but we're trying to do more the educational side. And basically, my interest started quite a few years ago. I was on the Conservation Commission in Cohasset, and I really was concerned about water quality and water quantity, for many years. And fortunately, got myself, got in the position that I could maybe have a soapbox, and I have been on it. So the Greenscapes program started about 10 years ago, and basically right now we're in 11 towns, in 9 towns, soon to be 11 towns. And basically we started out with the Greenscapes Guide, which has been substantially revised, but over time. But basically this used to be delivered to every house in the Greenscapes town. And the program has evolved into a lot wider program. We've gotten really involved now with kids. We do a program in all the schools, and I will say that we have now done the program for 15,000 kids. And we're very pleased about that. So I think I'm sort of going to go on and talk more about every drop counts and some of the ways that we're trying to get that message across. So if you could put this on. So one of the things that we want to really stress to people is how much watering. I think people do not have any idea about when they water their lawn how much they use. So in this flyer we talk about you put over one inch over an acre, which is basically 1 inch is what people recommend as what plants need in a week. You could put 10 backyard swimming pools on your backyard. In the irrigation system, which I Xeroxed upside down, we did and brought the wrong ones, so they're upside down. There's some, 5,000 square feet, which is really nothing. Can fill 5,900 soda bottles. So we're trying to get people to really understand what they're doing. And we'll continue. They're awful cute.
I'm sorry. So basically, we're trying to get people to understand, for example, about irrigation, which really is the main driver, I think, of water consumption. The extensive water consumption in the summer, which I think everybody has talked about, almost doubles in every town. And people think that the water that goes up comes down and goes into the ground, and it just stays in the system. And what we've discovered, the EPA has actually said that 80% of the water that goes onto the grass actually runs off, and it's carrying all the pesticides and herbicides and everything with it. So that is running straight to the stream, to the storm drain, going down the storm drain into the rivers, and then into the ocean, and it's leaving the system. And in the old days, I think you've all talked in previous times about how the system has become so disrupted. So our program is to try to keep hammering this home that people need to understand that if they care about their water, they need to do things in a different way. So we're trying to stress things, basic good greenscapes principles, decrease lawn size, using native plants, little or no chemical fertilizers, and trying to make people understand that it'll save them money, save them time, and save our water. So one of the things that we talk about, we have this Greenscapes pledge that that we try to bring out for people, and one is these are basic tenets that we think we can just scroll through. Water at dawn and water. These are things that we recommend. The program is started out 10 years ago as an adult education program, and it started out, as I said, with the Greenscapes Guide and a whole series of events, and it's evolved into, we have a website that is full of information that has been
vetted by some of the best landscape minds in the Boston area, so we feel really comfortable. The information on there it's been very well thought out. We do a Greenscape e-news. We hand materials out at events. And so we try to be as much in the community as we can. The towns have hired us. And then, as I said, the fifth grade program that we've done. And so basically, that's it. And I thank you.
Patty, do you want to get in the lights at the back of the room for me, please? Thank you. Thank you. Sorry we had a few technical difficulties. Thank you for bearing with us there. Yes, I'm sorry. Well, I actually have a funny story about Debbie and my children, who obviously you kind of met. A month ago, we had a great event down at the Hingham Harbor called Touch a Boat, and it was basically for kids to come and they got to climb on all kinds of boats, but we disguised all the water safety and water conservation and all kinds of other good things we wanted them to learn and all kinds of fun activities. So my 5 and 3-year-old, I was working the event and didn't get a chance to go around to all the people participating. So I got home and my 5 and 3-year-old, Noah and Lila, came up to me and said, "You know which one I really liked? That woman who did the, I won't say the word, I say it, the poop demonstration." And let me explain, because I had to get the explanation. They have this wonderful model that shows them that we put pepper on it, like pet waste. And if you don't pick up the pet waste, it showed them when the water came down exactly where it went and into the ocean. And my 5 and 3-year-old are still talking about Debbie's pepper demonstration. So thank you. It sticks and it works.
Are they picking up?
Yes, they are. And if I don't get there out in the back or quick enough, they let me know. So thank you. All right. With that, and Paul and Layla, thank you so much. I think we all have a lot of questions we want to get to in the panel conversation. You gave us a lot to think about. This increasing water rates is definitely going to be one people want to ask about. And Layla, just the measuring, and it's so important because if we are going to conserve, we want to know what progress we're making. So thank you for that. So next I'm going to introduce our moderator for the evening. I think many of you know Matt Zeitler. Come on up, Matt. Matt is not only the vice chair of the Hingham Community Preservation Committee, but he's also the national research director at the Trust for Public Land. So thank you, Matt.
Thanks so much. Do we want our panelists up here?
Yes, if everyone could come
Come on
on.
down. I'm going to try and not trip on these speakers.
Yes, there's a bit of a
The high-tech setup.
solution.
All right. I have a whole list of set of questions, but I'm getting the sense that maybe there are questions people in the audience have. So why don't we have people in the audience start off with questions? I will come bring the mic to you, and there's a mic. I was just looking to see if there's a mic set up in the back. And then just introduce yourself, and if the questions get slow, I have a whole 3 pages worth of questions. Here we go.
Paul, Judith Van Ham, glad to see you in person. I'm with the Weir River Watershed Association and a couple of other organizations. And the question is, do you know what effect, and I'm really impressed by what's happened in Sharon and the Spiraw community. Do you know what effect that had on the picture that you showed us of the waterfall? You know, of what's happening to the streams.
Well, is this going to work or not? I guess not. Does it work now? Let's see. Is that? No, I guess not. Thank you. Yeah, I've been asking myself the same question. I go out and read the stream gauges at that particular spot on a daily basis. It hasn't gone dry since 2010. The picture I had that I showed there was 2007. I think really the answer is, that's not so much does it go dry or not go dry, but how, on average, how many days per year would you expect to see it go dry? And hopefully, you know, there would always be at least a trickle moving through there. It so happens that that waterfall is right on the border between Sharon and Foxborough. So basically, Sharon is at a higher elevation than Foxborough, so the water flows from Sharon to Foxborough, and there's a whole cluster of municipal wells on the Foxborough side of the line just waiting for that water to come to Foxborough. But I would say it's a little better. We've only been keeping records since 2007, so you know, it's going to take a while. These effects take a long time to play out. And I can only say that, you know, every gallon we save is a gallon that ends up in the environment, and it's going to be better. It has to be better when we take less water. So
I'm going to have you keep the microphone because I have a follow-up question to that, if that's okay with everybody. I guess the sort of a two-part question on Sharon and then what's Georgetown?
Georgetown.
You cited about a $60,000 cost in Sharon for the program. Where did that funding come from? And then I guess the question I have about Georgetown is, whose idea was it to do the program in Georgetown?
The first question, as far as where does the money come from, as I pointed out in my presentation, we're saving about $70,000 worth of water treatment chemicals and electricity for pumping the municipal wells. So the $60,000 that we spend on water conservation is fully covered by those savings. The money comes from water bill revenues. We have an enterprise system in Sharon, meaning that the water department collects all of its, they have to cover all their costs with the revenues that they get from the water bills. So if we can avoid major costs like hooking up to MWA, which Sharon would have to pay for the pipe to go through a densely populated suburban area, several miles, it would be hugely expensive to build that pipeline. And you know, there is a membership fee to be paid to MWA. It's a minimum of about $500,000 right there, and there's permitting costs. It's a huge, expensive proposition to hook up to MWA, and we're dodging that bullet. Every year that we don't join, we save at least the interest on the capital that we'd have to post up to join. So the $60,000 that we spend, yes, it comes from the water bills, but it pays back. By promoting conservation, we're able to actually cost the community less in the total cost of supplying the community with water. And
was it hard to get the money the first time for that?
It's such a small percentage of the total water department budget. I mean, we're spending $3 million a year to run the water department and maintain our 120 miles of pipes, 18 miles of which is over 100 years old, and we're trying to catch up a little bit with our maintenance. But $60,000 out of $3 million is, I can't figure out the percentage in my head, but it's a very trivial percentage. It can easily be 5%. Is it that much? Huh. I don't think so, but maybe you're right. I don't know. In any event, it's not a significant fraction of the water department budget, so it's not hard to squeeze that. If everybody pays an extra $1 or $2 a year, it doesn't amount to a whole lot. So as far as the Georgetown idea, a friend of mine, George Comiskey, who's the executive director of the Parker River Watershed Association, he and I met in Boston at a number of state-type meetings on various subjects related to water policy, and we got to talking. I explained to him what we did in Sharon. He said, "Oh, you want to come up to Georgetown and do that up there? I think there's some grant money available." So we collaborated together and wrote a grant which in essence said, can we do in Georgetown what we already did in Sharon, and the guy from Sharon will come up and administer the grant. And DEP went for it, and they not only, the first grant was I think $49,000, and then we did that for a year, and then we got a second grant for $45,000. So we continued it, and the second grant spilled over to a third year. We finally finished it up in the end of the third year. But we actually taught 4 batches of third graders, over 100 kids in each time. So it was a pretty successful program.
Yeah, my name is Beverly Greenwald. I'm curious as to whether there are any
any programs that you might institute that might incentivize people to lower their water consumption. I know that my regular house, my summer house is in town, my regular house is in Newton, and I'm always getting things from the gas company, the electricity company, saying that you're the most efficient of your 200 surrounding neighbors or whatever. I'm wondering if that's a way to incentivize people to maybe give them in this area, you know, whatever, credit on their next water bill, just some financial incentive for them to, last year they used this many gallons in June, this year they're using this many gallons. The other issue is to incentivize people to use grass seed that doesn't in fact require a lot of water. It doesn't require herbicides, pesticides. I'm sure there are some grass seeds that can be given to people for free that would make them not have to use water to keep them and not have to fertilize.
Does this not work either?
I think this works. I guess I could talk about the grass seeds, but I think the incentivizing would come more from.
Why don't you go ahead and talk about the grass seed?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, there are grass seeds that we do recommend that, and that's part of the Greenscapes program. Is that we do recommend certain kinds that are much more drought tolerant, need less mowing, that kind of thing, which is basically fescues. A good blend of fescues is a really good place to start. But I think as far, and once again with Greenscapes, we do recommend, you know, trying to change how people landscape. And, you know, maybe there's a way to incentivize people. I mean, I know that, for example, in California, and there are different places where they actually pay people to take grass and high water consuming plants and things away from their yard. And I mean, so there are ways that you can do that as far as landscaping goes. I think for us, a lot more on where we are is a lot more about, I think probably, is water rates. I think that water rates can be used to incentivize people more than they are.
I just want to ask a follow-up question while we're talking about landscaping. How do you reach out under Greenscapes with landscapers? Because clearly they're, in a lot of cases, working with many homeowners in the community. What's their receptivity to a lot of this, as opposed to the direct homeowner, the landscapers who are doing a lot of this work?
That's something that we talk about a lot. I talk with a lot of people about that because basically they have to be licensed to put pesticides and herbicides on their lawn, but they really, you know, the irrigation guys are not licensed, and to me that's just a crime, and there's some bills trying to get them licensed, and I think they're probably going nowhere. But I feel like those are things I went to testify on that because they're not. I think they're probably not going to go anywhere. But like case in point, the guy next door to me, who supposedly is a landscape architect, put in a brand new system last spring, and I'm thinking to myself, here is a guy who supposedly is knowledgeable about this, and so I'm thinking it's not just about education. A lot of it has to be probably legislated.
Incentives, does somebody want to take that? Or?
I was just going to say that I know there is a program in California that's doing a similar thing to what you mentioned with your energy bill, where they say you have conserved X, you know, compared to your neighbors. That's all. Paul, you want to talk more?
Yeah, I just reiterate what Debbie and Layla said about water rates being an important driver of water conservation. the system that we have in Sharon starts at about $3 per 1,000 gallons in winter, which is 0.3 of a cent per gallon, and goes all the way up to $13.50 at the highest point in the summer. Contrast that $13.50 to the top water rate in Hingham, which is $5.23 per 1,000 gallons. I looked it up today. It's less than half, you know, and this is the rate that the people who use the most water will pay. The other thing about water rates that, you know, in addition to having the rates themselves incentivize people to conserve water, it's very important that people understand the rates and how their behavior, their water use affects their water bill. A study was done in 2006 that showed that if you educate the community about how water rates work and the fact that they have to pay more as they use more, that the rate goes up with their use. If you do that, the price elasticity of water, in other words, the responsiveness of people to those rates, will be 30% greater than if you didn't try to educate them. And that's where the water bill inserts come in. And I put a water bill insert, a typical one, or one that we came up with in Georgetown, which was inspired by that study, by the way. We felt it was important to tell the people of Georgetown, you know, how the water rates work. And if you read that flyer, I think you'll get the idea. So that's my response.
Just a follow-up question on water rates. I guess either for you, Paul, or for John, about who sets the rates? What's the rule? You know, is there a approval process? What's the role of the town, the state, the water company, or the water board? I don't know.
Well, I'd maybe defer to John on that one.
Just for people may not know how that happens and who would propose a rate structure of that nature here.
So water rates for private water companies like Corian are set by the Department of Public Utilities. Every 3 to 5 years, we'll put forth a rate proposal to the Department of Public Utilities, and then they will review it and modify it and finally set new rates for us. In terms of setting declining block rates, sometimes a water company will propose that to their rate regulator. Sometimes the rate regulator will require it when a utility comes in to set new rates. At the municipalities, I think rates are typically just set by a water commission.
Can we do anything?
To encourage inclining block rates. Yeah, I think related to Aquarium, yes, we have inclining block. It's just one level.
What would it take to convince you to do what Sharon was done?
First step is a meeting like tonight. I'm glad we have you here because we're learning a lot. Thanks, John.
Hi, thank you, Matt. Paul, I have a couple questions for you. Philip Lee, 22 Powers Lane in Hingham. And a couple questions. One, it's disturbing to me to hear a town has water rates almost 3 times higher than a for-profit water company. And I appreciate the fact that paying more, and you'll basically use less of the product, I understand. But there's got to be a point at which we've got to stop paying more and just start conserving. We can only afford to do so much. The question I have is, on the back of that Georgetown flyer that you put in, I have a couple of questions. Is the rate goes up quite a bit per usage. Is that usage taking into consideration the size of the family that is in that home? As in one person, or 5 or 6 or 8 people? I mean, am I penalized again for having a family? Okay, hold that one then. And then the next question I have with Sharon, what did the town of Sharon do to help conserve their water? What is their annual projected waste through leaky pipes underground annually, percentage-wise, 5, 10, 15, 25%? That we have, that you have that sharing has been, instead of, charging everyone so much money when they're spending maybe 1,000, 2,000 gallons of water a month, when the water is wasted by millions of gallons through old pipes. And then for Lila,
How can we answer these and then ask?
Okay, I'm not trying to really break, this is a great meeting here, so I think, I'll make sure you get to ask another question.
Is it possible to turn on the PowerPoint again? I have some slides.
One of our experts.
If it's possible.
I'm going to offer a comment. Yeah, I'm going to offer a comment before we answer, because Paul wants a slide. I'm guessing if substantially increased water rates were proposed by Weir to the state, they may not just get, routinely approved. Just a guess. Even though it may change behavior, I don't know if that would be responded to.
I want to make it clear that the lowest block rate of $3 per thousand is similar, I believe. I didn't calculate Aquarian's lowest block rate and convert into gallons. You do per 100 cubic feet. So, but they're not that different at the low end, and the majority of families don't use that much water, so they don't get into those high blocks. And if you could go to the next slide after that. Yeah, now before that one. This is a graph. This is a family. These are families of 6. There's about 134 families of 6 in Sharon. That's a fairly large household, so I use that as a typical household. I was expecting this question. I want to compliment you for asking it. It's a good one. And it's true. A family of 6 has a tougher time keeping out of the high rate blocks than a family of 2 or 3.
And grocery bills and
Yep,
bills, fuel costs,
sure. No, we're all feeling, yep. No, all understood and heard. But you have to look at this. If this is a graph of, it sort of starts with the most efficient family of 6 and goes to the least efficient family of 6. So you can see that within the 134 families of 6 in Sharon, there is a tremendous range of water uses. The median family of 6 in Sharon, okay, the one that's right in the middle of this 134 families, uses about 20,000 gallons during a summer quarter. That's about 37 gallons per person per day, which costs about $180 for the quarter, or $60 per month. That's not that different from a cell phone bill. So the family of 6, the median family of 6, the one that's right in the middle, some are using less, some are using more, is not paying all that much for water in Sharon, where our rates admittedly are somewhat higher than many communities, because we've been making a conscious effort to get our water rates up to what's called a full cost pricing, which means we're not kicking the can down the road anymore. We're taking care of our aging water system. Many of our pipes are over 100 years old. We have to maintain our wells and our water supply so that we have a reliable source of water. And if we don't charge enough for water, we have been falling behind. Now we're trying to catch up again. We're trying to do it in an equitable way that also encourages conservation. And that's basically our philosophy and our strategy for dealing with this issue. I wanted to point out that even in summer and in winter, if you could show the next slide, it's kind of, I'm sorry, go back one. There's one point I want to make here. No, go forward one, please. Yeah, that one. You can see the people that are using a lot of water in summer. These are families of 6. They're undoubtedly families with lawn irrigation systems. So a lot of the families of 6 that are paying high water bills and are using a lot of water for non-essential purposes, namely lawn irrigation. So, hey, if they got the money and they want to irrigate their lawn, I don't have a problem with that myself. As long as they're paying through the nose for it, that's fine. The ones who are not using so much water never get out of... Those colored lines, by the way, on the bottom represent the rate blocks. So the green line is the first rate block. The second brown line is the second rate block, and that red line, or orange maybe it looks, is the third rate block. And you can see that fewer than half of the families of 6 ever get into that top rate block. So they're mostly paying at a modest rate. Next slide, please. This is the winter rate. And interestingly, you'd expect it to be pretty much uniform in the winter, but it's not. It's funny how some families, these are again families of 6, Some families of 6 are using modest amounts of water, and some are using quite a bit. And I suspect that the ones over on the right that are using a lot of water are probably have a leaky toilet or something that they're not attending to the leakage, and they're paying for it. If they would be more sensitive to, pay more attention that they might have a leak, they'd cut way down on their water bill and get out of that top bracket. So, thank you.
Keep it on your chin.
At our town meeting, I brought up something when we were talking about whether the town would take over the same water process that Aquarium has. I mentioned something that I saw 3 years ago, and that was, it was also a dry time, and the water company was making telephone calls automatic, saying conserve your water. My wife and I were traveling around Hingham, seeing water streaming down the various hills. We saw it was irrigation, but much of it, and that's not changing today. We saw this last week. Same thing on Fearing Road, places at Hull. Probably 20 or 30% of the water is aiming for the grass, ends up on the driveway, goes down the hill, and just pools and goes down the drain. Can there be a penalty for that? Is it legal for the, whether it's the town of Hingham, if they owned it, or the Aquarium, or some other water company, whether it's town or whatever, could impose a sanction on a customer? That you have many people in our town who, and commercial enterprises, they're some of the worst, will just pay whatever it takes, unless they are really have strong incentives, legal perhaps. So that's my question. Thank you.
I'll be happy to take it if you don't want to.
You could take it.
Sure. My personal philosophy is that I want to live in a friendly community. I want neighbors to get along with neighbors, and I don't want neighbors to be ratting out neighbors. That's why I think the steeply ascending block water rate system is so beneficial in our community, because when I see somebody doing, and we do have people like that in Sharon that just don't care, and they squirt their lawn irrigation on the street and it runs down, when I see that, my first impulse is to grab the phone and call the water department and rat them out. But then I think, wait a minute, they're paying my water bill for me. I don't have to worry about it. The penalty's built in. When they're paying $13.50 per 1,000 gallons on the margin, I just don't worry about it. And as a matter of fact, as I showed in my slides, you can see the results, that the water use on average in Sharon is trending downwards. And more importantly, the peak demand, which is what happens in summer when people are watering their lawns, that's coming down even faster, which tells me, because we've saved 20% on our average use, but we've saved about 33% off the peak demand. A lot of our savings are disproportionately coming from the heavy water users. These are the people that are squirting water on the street. And they're stopping, they're slowing down, they're getting a big fat water bill and they're saying, oops, I don't want to do that again. What can I do? So they may call up their irrigation system consultant and say, can you point the irrigation nozzles toward the grass instead of the street so I'm getting my money's worth at least? Can you put more efficient nozzles on there? Can you put a sophisticated irrigation system controller on there so that it doesn't water the lawn while it's raining out? I mean, this is the most common complaint I get on the water committee is why in the hell are people watering their lawn when it's raining out? It all gets back to the rates. If the penalty is built into the rates, then you don't have to worry about going around and being the, watering police and trying to knock on people's door and get in their face and create a very unfriendly community.
Just a point from the last watershed forum, I don't know if I'll get the exact figure right. Something like the water usage we used, was it in the mid-80s, is about the same as we use now, and yet the population has gone up by several thousand. And some of the neighborhoods with very large lawns have been built in that time. I don't know if John, if you... So there's actually some good news in the past couple decades of water use.
Yeah, so our water, we have a registration for water withdrawal. It was set, it's set at 3.5 million gallons a day on average for the calendar year. And that was set based on our actual water usage in Hingham, North Cohasset in the early 80s. And we are still, the system still is below that limit, which is definitely a success story. It means that we've been able to control, the community's been able to control water usage to no more than what was used in the early 80s.
Just wanted to give that perspective. I have a question for Layla because I want to make sure that everybody doesn't just ask Paul questions. What type of activities, in terms of increasing stream flow, what type of activities do communities engage in? And is there an example of a model community you could point to that's really doing an effective job at both monitoring stream flow and taking action to increase it?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit more about Situate, which I mentioned in my presentation. So they have been monitoring stream flow in Situate on First Herring Brook since, I'm going to get the year wrong, 2005, Sam? 2003. So quite a long time. And so they have a good record of stream flow at a lot of different gauges throughout the watershed. And they've actually decreased the number of gauges over time as they found that they really need to just focus on a couple points. And through that process that I mentioned of setting flow targets, the town agreed to releases from their reservoirs that they thought they could support. And so that's a very concrete flow restoration action. A lot of the things that Paul is talking about with water conservation are harder to measure over time, as he said. We hope to, over the years, measure with the gauges that we have in the two watersheds in Sharon, improvements in stream flow, but that is slightly harder to measure. But in Situate, we can really say, gosh, right downstream of this reservoir, we see, a more natural flow pattern than we used to see. And we can, and we're meeting our targets. That's the real thing we really look for. Okay, the water department is trying to release this amount of water out of the dam, and they are doing that, in each season. So that's a real concrete thing. Releases out of dams, out of low-level outlets, conservation, returning stormwater into the watershed, or some sort of major flow restoration activities.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer the second question that this gentleman asked before about unaccounted for water in Sharon. Didn't want to blow that one away. If you could open up the PowerPoint again, or maybe you want to take another question and get that slide up, and then...
Sure, why don't we do that?
Okay.
Our interest here is in saving water, right? It's good for the environment. It's good not to put carcinogens on our lawns in the form of herbicides and pesticides. Why isn't there a movement to have somebody come to your individual house and say, okay, you attributed that high water bill in the winter it was from leaky toilets, but in the summer it was from irrigation. They may have leaky toilets all year long, right? The toilet doesn't stop leaking because it's summertime. So why isn't there somebody who comes and says, okay, I'm going to spend a couple hours in your house, I'm going to check and see if there's a leak, I'm going to look at your irrigation system, I'm going to see if everything is pointed here, I'm going to give you some grass seed for 50% of the cost, because you're not going to have to put anything on to make it look greener, you're not going to have to put anything on to kill the weeds and all. People don't want to be putting Scott's, whatever, this and that on their lawn. Why isn't there something like that? Is it?
I have a little bit of an answer, which I know. When the Commonwealth had electricity deregulation about 15 plus years ago, there's a surcharge everyone in Massachusetts pays on their electricity bill, which goes to utility providers who provide that service. So that's why they do it. That's why energy audits happen. I happen to know right now the legislature is considering a water infrastructure bill. I don't know if that is something like that is in there. That would be where providers would have an incentive to do it. Anybody else wants to further answer that?
Yeah, I would just agree with what you just said, Matt. I know that I've seen communities that have paid for such home audits for water conservation, and it is expensive. And so finding the funding to support that is a challenge.
Can I just?
Yeah.
So with Greenscapes, you know, each year we have some different deliverables, and a couple of years ago we had a deliverable of offering businesses free irrigation audits. And I went to the different towns, to some of the bigger businesses, especially businesses that I saw watering in the middle of the day, or the heads were going into the street. And I talked to their managers, and I said, you know, we're offering a free audit. Not one business took us up on that offer. I don't know, there seems to be some resistance about this. When we have irrigation, we used to have, Water's cheap, and you know, I mean, we would have we'd have a series of lectures, and the lecture no one came to was an irrigation lecture. I mean, no one comes, and people who have irrigation systems want to, as they say, set it and forget it. And that's why I feel, you know, when we made this up last year, we feel that, you know, that there should be some way legislatively to make people have a system that conforms, you know, with backflow preventers, with rain sensors, with and that is every couple of years the installer, somebody has to go in and inspect it, because the set it and forget it just is terrible in consuming vast amounts of water.
I'm going to ask Debbie a follow-up question just about irrigation. And how do towns do? Like the towns themselves, who have, in some cases, athletic fields and other things that they use, they're landscaping and using water. Are they receptive? I don't know if anyone's here from the school committee in Hayward Hall. How does that work? Are they big water consumers? Could they make a difference in their bill? So anyway.
My experience, which, you know, I won't say is across the board, but it's the same thing with talking to them about, you know, turf management in these different towns, or park management, that they say we are driven by the demands of the townspeople, that we make our decisions. They want a weed-free, really lush park or piece of property, and we'll do what it takes to deliver that. So we talk a lot at the watershed about, you know, how can we change so that that's no longer really cool, and that we can get people, we need a mindset change. And Sam and I talk about this a lot, and we say, you know, it's kind of like the anti-smoking campaign. You know, you work and you work and you keep trying to get the message out, and people start to understand, but the behavior change takes quite a while. And I think we are getting in the, you know, the upper level of understanding. So I don't think we're at the ground level, but we haven't necessarily broken through the behavior change yet.
If I could, he was talking, I remembered that I left out a big piece of the Situate story. I'm sure I left out several pieces, Sam. But I did leave out one big piece that we keep touching on, which is irrigation systems. So at the same time that the town started doing these releases from their reservoirs for downstream flows, they also implemented a restriction on in-ground irrigation systems. And so people with irrigation systems can only use them one day a week, and it rotates through the town. And that was first passed in 2011, and it's been in place every summer since then.
Do you want to talk about the survey? The survey?
So now, you know, we just looked at it again. I think Sarah calculated it's over 380,000 gallons a day we saved last year.
And do people feel lawns in Situate look terrible now, or they don't see that?
Well, Sam, the survey, right? I mean, we have...
There was a survey of the town from the water department, and everybody was happy with this one-day week. Not everybody. The regulated community, I think, was not as happy as the rest of the irrigation. But they conceded the point.
I wonder the Sharon perspective, you know, is the people, you know, since there's no one from the Sharon School Committee here, are they we're aware of using sensible irrigation on the athletic fields of Sharon? I'm not saying we're not, I have no idea if we are or not.
Yeah, that's a problem in Sharon. The schools don't pay for their water. So because they get free water, it's kind of hard to, I mean, we can ask them, and we do. We get complaints from people who see the lawn irrigation running on the ball field during the rain, and they say, wait a minute, you're not setting a very good example here. And we go around and around on this. Again, you know, if the schools had to pay for the water, they might be a little more careful with it. The pricing signal is a strong one, and it's probably the most effective way to get people to conserve. I'd like to just answer a little bit of the question about you know, audits and how is there somebody available to go out to the houses and help. You've got, you know, your pricing signal, at least in a town like Sharon where we have progressive water rates that are covering the full cost. It's starting to, people are starting to feel it a little bit. So they have the internet, you know, you can figure stuff out that way. I learned a lot myself just by surfing the net, and there's an awful lot of information out there. The water department sells grass seed at a huge discount, this fescue grass seed. So the water department is helping people not only with their lawns, but also by giving away free shower heads and free faucet aerators. When they give you a free energy audit, anybody who pays an electric bill can get a free energy audit. And when I had mine done, they came and replaced the shower head in my bathroom. They said, here's a more efficient shower head. So they will not only look at light bulbs, but they'll also look at plumbing fixtures. So there's some help there. We do have a water conservation coordinator who's a part-time person. That's out of the $60,000 that we spend on water conservation, $25,000 is for a water conservation coordinator who does public outreach. She puts articles in the paper. She goes into the schools. She gets the high school students to do, with the art department, to do graphics about water conservation. And they did such a nice job that they had an exhibit at the State House of water conservation art posters that they made. And they also put signs around town, very clever little signs to remind people as they go around town in various, you know, like at the soccer fields, there'd be a sign, please conserve water, and some catchy phrase there. And I want to just relate one little anecdote about the water department also stands ready to help people. Somebody called up the water department and says, hey, I got a $500 bill here. I never get a $500 bill. It's usually $100. What is going on? You guys are screwed up over there. I never use that much water. I couldn't have. And the guy listened to him and he says, you know, I bet you got a leaky toilet. The guy says, I don't have a leaky toilet. If I had a leaky toilet, I would hear the toilet running. So the water department guy offers to come out and look. The guy says, sure, come on out. You'll see, I don't have any leaks. The guy went out, the water department guy went in the house, made a beeline for the bathroom, opened up the lid on the tank, and showed him where the water was just sneaking over the standpipe, little by little, but it was running 24/7. He took the armature of, you know, have that float ball in the toilet, he just bent it a little bit so that the water level would be a little bit lower and it wouldn't spill over the standpipe. $500. So that's my story. Thank you.
Peter Swanson, 87 Detroit. Hingham High School has a green committee that I think is spectacular. And through education, I think you can make deep inroads. This year they had a green week, and Aquarius was part of that celebration. And they did an activity that sensitized students toward water use. And the Green Committee has talked a great deal about how they inform students and how they can help reduce. And so I think talking to old people is kind of a waste of time. I think talking to young people, planting seeds, and I think that really needs to be the kind of approach that some of you are doing, and I think it ought to be continued. And if you get a chance to say something to a school committee member or a member of the administration in the Hingham Public Schools, I think we should tell them that you heard that this Green Committee is really making tremendous inroads.
this, Dick Avery from Cohasset. I think this chart that we've been staring at for minutes should beg a lot of questions. And we've been talking for the last 5 minutes about audits, but how could families of this same number of people have such dramatically different consumption rates of water, and we don't know how to account for it? And when we talk about the students being a solution pathway, maybe we should present to a high school class this chart or a similar chart and have them do something called a fishbone diagram of how would we explain this? Why would one family use 5 times as much water as another? Is it how they wash their dinner dishes? Is it a household of teenagers? Is it just the leaky shower head, toilet, outside faucet? But to me, this one chart, whether it's summer or winter, should be explored. And we should put our collective minds together to understand it. Once we understand, it takes a lot less enforcement. We do wake up and say, oh, just like the hockey kids were trying to tell us, turn the water off when you brush your teeth. See who can take the shortest shower. Because I believe that's the winter up there. That's not irrigation. That's not car washing. Well, maybe car washing. Or summer. But still, because of the scale, if you still forget that real spike and look at the lowest to the highest, there's still a dramatic difference family to family. And those practices can be shared, whatever, once we uncover.
Great point. Do we have this kind of data in hand? I mean, is this, not obviously who, but, do we know who uses what? That's, I guess, what. Or and it all.
Sure. Yeah, we have consumption records, of course, for each household, but we don't necessarily have the number of people in each household. So we couldn't put together a graph like this at this time.
That could be done. You can get information from the town of Hingham, find out how many children, and then correlate that to the bills.
The merge census data with board.
Yeah, it's available on a disk.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. We have quarterly billing.
And Sharon, do you have a monthly bill? Somebody else back there, I know one question.
George McKay, 10 Chamberlain Run. I just wanted to compliment Aquarian on something they are doing. There's been all this conversation about high prices on the rates. Every month on the water bill, I report on the water bill. The Aquarian bill has a bar chart for the last year and a half. And I one time saw the water rate going up. And I wondered, gee, it's up like about 30% over last year. Why? And as I wandered around, I noticed in the basement, the sink I have down there, the hot water had a drip. Wasn't much of a drip. The next bill was double. So I went down and I changed that little faucet. And now it's lower. So I just want to compliment Aquarium on giving us the information so we know what to look.
Good news. Not that much. I wonder if I could just answer the question that we've been waiting. He asked way in the beginning. Could you advance the slide a little, one more after that? That's it. This is a graph of unaccounted for water in Sharon. As you can see, the last 4 years has seen a huge increase in unaccounted for water, and we're really struggling with this. Every single water committee meeting, we bring up the topic. Have you found any more leaks? What are you doing to find leaks? And the water department has been struggling to bring this back under control. They have gone out and invested in leak detection equipment, which is like acoustic. You can hear the hiss of a leak when it's leaking underground. And There's ways of listening to the water pipes to hear where the hiss is coming from, and they can locate where the leaks are. One of the big problems we have with unaccounted for water is that many of the leaks are in service lines that go from the street to the house. Those service lines are owned by the property owner, not by the water department. They are the responsibility of the property owner to fix. And the problem is that usually the water meter's in the house. So if there's a leak between the water main on the street and the house, that the customer is not paying for that lost water, even though it's coming out of the pipe that he owns. So, you know, the only way to really deal with it is for when the water department locates a service line leak, they threaten to turn off the water if the customer doesn't respond and fix the leak. And often this can be a $3,000 or $5,000 or $6,000 repair. It's expensive. So what we're doing now, we're just getting to this. We're putting in a loan system at a very low interest rate so that the customer can, you know, they still have to fix the leak. The leak must be fixed. But by financing it over several years through a low interest loan from the water department, it makes it easier for the person to deal with the, you know, $5,000 or $6,000 cost.
Once again, it's back. I don't want to hear blaming the consumer for some of this unaccounted water loss, and it's on my back again to pay for it. What is the percentage that Sharon has of unaccounted water overall?
Roughly, the worst we had was, see that spike there in 2010? That's about 19%. Whereas the 2013 is about 14%, I think. And let me just put that in context. And the state standard is 10%. We have a ways to go. We're trying to get there. The pipes are too old, which gets back to full cost pricing. If we had water rates that covered the full cost of replacing the water pipes as they age, like once every 100 years, which we're not even keeping up with that pace, then we might not have so many leaks in the first place.
Well, okay, then let me bring it in perspective here for Hingham. I mean, Aquarian is here as a for-profit company, and they're saying that they're going to, I'm speaking for them, but not officially, okay, that they have a plan to fix all these pipes. Hingham wants to take over Aquarian. They have a plan to fix all these pipes, okay? None of them goes up to $13.50 per 1,000 gallons, okay? And I compliment Aquarian for bringing the very best town-owned water company, Sharon, here to convince us to keep Aquarian and not go over to Hingham.
I'm not trying to do that.
No.
One way or the other. I'm not taking sides in that fight.
But you're saying that $13.50 per 1,000 gallons, Sharon still cannot fix the pipes. It's not, I mean, what is the actual cost it should be charged by Sharon to fix the pipes? Give me a good idea so I know how much it's going to cost me with Aquarian or Hingham, you know, in 2025 or 2030.
When I joined the water committee, we were raising approximately less than $2 million a year, which was, we were falling behind. We finally, we had a master plan done. We paid $100,000 for it in 2010, which told us that we needed to be spending $3 million a year, or actually $3.3 million per year. And you can't just raise the rates all of a sudden for all the reasons that you're pointing out. We've gradually squeezed up the rates so that now in 2014, we finally reached approximately $3.3 million in revenues. Now, there's a tremendous lag effect here. We're just getting now to the point where we have enough revenue to get started addressing these aging water pipes. This is a very long-term proposition. Our master plan is a 20-year master plan. I think you will see that over the next decade or so that we are able to bring down the unaccounted for water to 10%. But you know, you have to be patient with this stuff and look at the big picture and take the long view.
No, exactly. That's why I'm wondering, what do I need to budget for in the future, you know, to pay for water?
Yeah, I couldn't answer that question for Hingham, but you could hire a consultant to tell you.
For sure. I mean, we got 100-year-old pipes or two pipes are pipes, okay, and they leak, and I think what we have is 28% unaccounted water. 21. Okay. So it's very similar.
Yeah, it's hard to control unaccounted for water. It takes resources and it takes dedication and.
It's a lot of leaky toilets that people are paying $13,000, $50,000.
Well, the unaccounted for water is not toilets.
No,
that's accounted.
No, I know that, but
okay.
The city was on the hook to pay for their unaccounted water, and as the consumers are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Oh, so Matt referenced earlier the water infrastructure bill that's in Massachusetts. I'm wondering, does that cover leak detection and repair costs? Do you
I don't know that.
Okay. Because that is, I mean, it's a huge, huge, huge cost, and it's a big undertaking, and it is going to be expensive for years to cover it, so.
While you have the microphone, I have
Yeah.
a stream gauge monitoring question.
Yeah, sure.
How many should we have on the Weir River to adequately monitor, and who can do that monitoring? Like, how many people do you need? How often should we be doing that? And if we wanted these sensor gauges, what would it cost to do those?
Sure, okay, so the first question about how many gauges do we need is always a tough question, because it's really, where are you hoping to A, document an impact, and B, document an improvement? And so you really want to be thinking about where, within the management of the watershed for supply, you might, or for some other impact that you're hoping to detect, where you might be able to sort of reasonably be able to measure that, if that makes sense. So, you don't need to have gauges all up and down the watershed. But what you do need to have is, so again, looking to Situate, we had gauges downstream of the reservoirs, because that's where we were hoping to detect an impact. If you wanted to be seeing what's going on in a Cord Brook, and if there was any proposal to do things differently in a Cord Brook, you would want to be gauging there.
Why Union Street?
We picked Union Street to involve the Hingham High School students in large part. We were interested in getting students involved in gauging in exactly what the gentleman in the middle referred to as getting, working with students and getting students to work with their parents and talking about water conservation. So that's why we put the Union Street gauge in. It also is, I believe, just downstream of the main well field. But it's hard to document. We sometimes try to put gauges upstream of a well field and downstream of a well field. And there's other factors. There's, what does the aquifer look like? Are there other tributaries? It's hard to say, stream flow upstream of the wells should equal stream flow downstream of the wells plus the wells. You just can't exactly make that mass balance work out. That's the long answer to say we need to, we should talk more about how many gauges exactly you would need. To set them up, so what we normally do in Riffles is we have volunteers reading the gauges, and we're moving more and more to saying we'll work with volunteers for a couple years. We hope to get them to be reading the gauges, let's say 5 times a week, would really present us with a fairly clear picture. And Sharon, what do you guys do, Paul? You're about 5 times a week, I would say.
Yeah, we miss a few days here and
Yeah.
there if the weather's bad, but we skip it in the winter, but we try to do it daily.
So that we have a pretty accurate picture of stream flow at the gauges and Sharon. And then
Do the high school kids walk down the street to the gauge once a day for school? They will get volunteers, right?
You'd think it would be easy. Yeah. we have a number of gauges near high schools, and they're some of our less monitored gauges. The sensors can cost is somewhere around $1,000 per gauge, or more if you're trying to do a real-time gauge or something like that. And it is something that we would consider.
That sounds much lower than I expected.
Yeah, and those are costs that we cover with communities.
Actually, this is a good segue. I'm Jennifer Bertner from 16 Powers Lane. I actually grew up on Union Street, right next to what you're talking about is the gauge. So I have a question that maybe bridges 2 different things. One is the gauge issue and one is the infrastructure investment, the capital investments we do as we transfer ownership. And as many, I think Hingham is one of the last, are we one of 13 now in the Commonwealth that is currently privately owned? Our infrastructure systems, I believe that's correct, or was the last. So as we've seen this privatization, now swinging back to public ownership, the issue that actually in Hingham, one of the big issues with Aquarian was the breaks that were happening on Union Street and other areas that were for a long time not part of the capital investment thing Aquarian had for updating the infrastructure payment. And it was costly, it was costing a lot of money, it was having a lot of service breaks. Similarly, at the time, we had new gauges on along the river. And in fact, in our earlier meeting here, DEP stated that at the time of that meeting, there were no gauges in the Weir River. So I guess my first question would be, what we heard 2 meetings ago is very different than what we're hearing from Layla today. I'm very glad to hear that there are gauges now on the river. I'm wondering if that happened between the last 2 meetings.
No.
And if so, where are they? Is DEP part of this oversight? And then I guess the secondary is, as we move from private ownership, which is happening across the state, into public ownership, are we being inordinately taxed at the municipal level, right, in terms of rates increasing, as we are now having to update what has not been updated for many, many years of oversight of private companies owning these as we take on at the municipal level? And I guess that's a larger Commonwealth issue. Maybe Sharon's not the best, or one particular town is not the best example of that. But do you have any other kind of comparative examples of moving from private ownership to public ownership, and are we burdened as a municipality inordinately to do those capital investments?
Thank you. And just an editorial comment, I don't know of that many circumstances where private is getting taken over by public. I mean, I don't know how much provision there is for it. Yeah, but I'll let someone else who knows more answer that.
So on the gauge question, what I believe DEP was probably saying was that there's no USGS maintained gauge currently operating on the Weir River, which is correct. So the U.S. Geological Survey is the stream gauger in the nation. They are, do a bang-up job. We follow their methods. We, have them on contract to look over our data, but we don't do it at the same level that they do it at. So that's probably what DEP was referring to. So currently there is one gauge that is being read and maintained, Union Street, and that was the gauge was put in by Sam, I believe, about 12 years ago or so, maybe 14.
Around the time the GCA report.
Right. But then we started getting volunteers to read it again as of last spring.
We stopped reading it after a year, so it was defunct until just this last week we reinvigorated it. In the interim, there was a USGS gauge at 11th Street.
Right.
That was put in, that we saw the data from.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an automatic reader, not volunteer based, so that was
Mm-hmm.
by the USGS. And the funding from that got cut in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was only run for
3.5 years, I think.
3.5 years.
Yeah.
So when DEP said that, what they want is a long-standing, reading gauge.
Yep.
Except they want long-term data.
Yep. So, Matt, I think we have time for one, maybe 2 questions.
Yeah, 2 more questions. So. And then we'll have some more time. People can choose with each other. I think. Do we have more questions back there, or they were called up before? Or? Doing the PSA, right?
Yeah.
They're supposed to be. I think they brought out pastries after the kids left.
Okay, I want to remind us that one of the reasons we're worried about water withdrawal and limits is because of the impact on habitat. So this measuring stream flow is important, perhaps more for the non-verbal denizens of this area, meaning fish and wildlife rather than humans. I know that an aquarium draws water from wells and the stream or the pond or whatever sources the pond. Their intakes. Is there a way to manage our withdrawal when we draw from I'll call it the aquifer versus stream bed? For instance, in the winter, maybe we should draw from the stream bed and leave the water in the ground, so that in the summer we can draw from the wells rather than the stream bed and keep the stream flowing. I'm not a hydrologist, but I'm worried about where we take the water from, and if there's a way to be more year-round careful with how we use the source of water. Probably a question.
That's a great question.
Good thing John's here. We can walk.
It's a great question because I don't know how many people are aware of that. We have 8 active wells and a reservoir, so we have a lot of options for where we withdraw water. Now, in the summer, we withdraw water from all of those sources. But you're right, in the non-summer months, we have an option to take water from a couple of the well fields and from the reservoir. It would require, I think, some modeling to determine which combination of those sources is best to withdraw water from to protect the environment. And we hope to do that, some of that modeling over the next year or two.
Last question, somebody have? Question about that.
Samantha. How much resistance did you get to the raising of the rates in the town of Sharon? How much resistance did they get from the raising of the rates in the town of Sharon?
Well, as I explained earlier, we had to squeeze up the rates to get from 2 million to 3 million or 3.3 million per year. I would say that we got minimal resistance. Every time we would take a step, it's been an evolution over the last few years. I would make a point of asking the DPW superintendent how much flack he took from the rate increase, and by and large, it was minimal. I would characterize it as minimal. There was a tremendous amount of resistance from the water commissioners to raising the rates because I think the water commissioners didn't really want to be known, they didn't want their legacy to be higher water rates. They wanted to, cater to the people and say, well, we're bringing you water for less money and all this. But I think people, there's been enough education in town about, A, the importance of water. We don't have a town without water. And B, the reliability and the quality of that water, that people really understand that you get what you pay for. And they trust the water department. There's a lot of people that criticize the water department, but underneath, I think there's a fundamental level of trust there that they understand that it takes money to get the job done. So there hasn't been a lot of resistance. I would just like to respond to what the gentleman before the previous question talked about ecosystem services and the value of ecosystem services. In 2003, Mass Audubon put out a report called Losing Ground, at what cost? And it's about land development in Massachusetts primarily, but there's something in the appendix that I found very interesting, and that was that they showed the value of ecosystem services in Massachusetts statewide at $6.3 billion. And those ecosystem services are lumber from trees that get cut, the water that we get, the value of the water, cleansing the water, how much it would cost to replace the cleansing ability of, say, the Quabbin Reservoir is surrounded by this pristine, watershed that doesn't have any houses in it at all. And those trees and those forests purify the water when it rains, and they remove contaminants that are waterborne contaminants. Like when it rains, it brings down sulfur and mercury from power plants in Ohio and that sort of thing. And the forest actually filters that stuff out. So by the time it gets to the treatment plant, it's very good quality water, even before it goes into the treatment plant in Marlborough. That's another example of ecosystem services provided by the environment in our state. And we can't have ecosystem services without water in the environment. If we didn't have water in the environment, we'd have Sahara Desert. It just wouldn't be anything alive. We wouldn't have those ecosystem services. And I'd just like to compare, and this may be an unfair comparison, I've been criticized for making it in the past, but I would like to point out that the total amount of revenues that are derived from selling water in the state is less than $3 billion a year. So compare that with the $6.3 billion in ecosystem services rendered by our water-dependent ecosystems in our state. And you realize that, when you take a gallon of water, you're removing it from the environment and contaminating it potentially with various things, pharmaceuticals, personal care products, whatever. So All I'm trying to point out is that when you try to figure out the value of water, you have to take into account those ecosystem services that would not be available if we take all the water away from the environment.
Great point to end on. I want to thank Paul and Layla and Debbie. Please give them all a round of applause. I don't know if you have more.
Well, I just want to wrap up by, again, on behalf of the environmental partners, thank you for sharing your insight and expertise. We really appreciate it. And Matt, once again, great job. Thank you. We love it. And our mark is available. So thank you for coming.
I actually did a report at the Trust Republic Line where I work on